The lifetime of a brand basically follows something called a power grid. And essentially the axes of the power grid are your strength versus your stature. Your strength being DNR, your stature being ENK. And so what happens is a product, you start out, and the first thing you want to build up is differentiation. And the thing is, as you build up that differentiation, what happens, you try to connect with them on a customer's needs and what they want from your product. And so I build up relevance. So what ends up happening is that I start out here and I move into here. And now I start building on esteem, getting customers to know you, and this is where I become a leader. Then what happens is that when you start losing your brand strength, then you start to decline and you become a commodity. And so what are some examples about that? Part of the reason why Hallmark has still been able to stay relatively strong is essentially in all four pillars of its brand, it stays there. Here's a migration of Starbucks in their brand. They've eroded probably slightly, but they're still in a leadership position. As you can see, Google's a shot straight up. Part of the reason why they were able to start so high to begin with is because there were other search engines out there. And essentially they could get a head start because they're brand new. Whereas Starbucks, what were they? They were the first, opened the first coffee shop and built up from there. A lot of you may not remember these brands. Howard Johnson's used to be one of the biggest hotel chains in the United States. I used to love going there because that's where you went if you wanted ice cream. I mean, it was a real treat when the family went out and went to the Hojo's. But what ended up happening is in 2002, Howard Johnson stopped differentiating themselves. They weren't any different than Holiday Inn or anybody else. And then Marriott came in with their low end, and that pretty much killed Howard Johnson's. Greyhound. I grew up in the East. You take the bus. A Greyhound bus was a big deal because they were the nice, comfortable bus, except they were more expensive. But the thing is, what ended up happening with Greyhound is people stopped caring about them. And part of it is, if I'm going to go from like here to Tucson, do I really care about Greyhound, or am more concerned about, gee, what in the bus schedules, what best fits my schedule and time? And so Greyhound essentially became commoditized. And then we look at what happened to AOL. And AOL at one time had its meteoric rise. The problem with AOL and what they ran into is they stopped innovating. And not only that, they fell in love with some of their features, and some of their features are kind of kludgy. And so, guess what? If you notice, this curve also goes negative this way. And so what ended up happening is they got to know the business company. And getting to know you isn't always a good thing, because guess what? I also know your faults too. And that's why when knowledge becomes greater than esteem, you're in trouble. Because they have no feelings for you, but they know you for who you are. And so what ended up happening is AOL no longer differentiated itself, and so it's come crashing down. It's managed to hold on, but essentially it's just in the commodity clone zone. Now in terms of tech brands, the thing is, for technology-based enterprises, popularity alone can't save you. You still have to be relevant to what people do. The thing about digital media is it's a double-edged sword. You start out E being greater than K because it's viral, but it can switch on you. And this is why you always need to be maintaining differentiation, because people want something that's going to stand out. So in terms of brand strategy, once you establish a brand, can I do that to increase my business opportunities? And so if I look at my brand name and I see how I can expand it out, whether it's through existing products or new products, what you can see is you can actually morph the brand into totally new products and categories. The thing about a brand extension is it's extending that name to another class of products. The pros are If people trust you, they'll make the journey with you. But the thing is, in order for that to happen, I need very, very high esteem. I need very, very high emotion. Uh, for example, there are 7 million less than bright people out there who went out and bought an Apple Watch. No offense to anyone if you are actually one of those people who did. Basically just some blind faith on Apple. I mean, that's your cult. The thing is, Bic, for example, made pens, and then they went to disposable razors, and everybody said, what, disposable razors? But if you sit down and think about it, what's a ballpoint pen? It's metal and a housing of plastic. What's a disposable razor? A strip of metal and a housing of plastic. This is why it made sense for them to make that kind of extension. But people were more willing to take the risk because a big name was associated with it. Starbucks built a good brand, and then they did something kind of silly with it. They started extending it into areas that didn't matter. Does anyone remember Starbucks ice cream? I don't. And what they really did not realize is they're viewed as a beverage company. The thing is, when you extend your brand into new classes, you are taking a risk. Because if you flop in that area, then everybody's going to remember that. And so you sully the brand. Why risk it? Basically, it's part of your toolbox. It's something that you can use and do it cheaply rather than having to create a whole new brand, which takes a long time and is very expensive. And so you want people to think favorably about your product. So instead of being totally unknown, you are a brand. The thing is, in terms of leveraging your brand, the thing is you have to be consistent with your current brand meaning. And you have to look at what is the likelihood that people are going to value this product more. Meaning, before you start leveraging your brand into something else, make sure you're going to get enough bang for your buck. And so Starbucks was more than just about food and coffee. Who did a good job of leveraging their brand? Nike. Because what did Nike do? They started out in shoes. Then they went to apparel. And then they went to sports equipment. If Nike had jumped from shoes to sports equipment, it would have been a little more shaky. But what did they do? A shoe is a piece of apparel. And so they just expanded apparel. They did it slowly. They did it correctly. The thing you have to remember also about when you start leveraging your brand is you're crossing a bridge and there might not be going back. So what are brands worth? When I sell my company, they say, well, we still have our brand name. So it's an intangible asset. The thing is, when you're having mergers, for example, how much of that brand name can I carry over with me? When I acquire a company, how much is it going to be worth to me? For example, nobody wants to acquire Sears. And part of it is, yes, Sears is still a company that has $8 billion in revenue. Well, they're losing money too, but part of the reason why Sears isn't attractive to people is Sears at one time was one of the top 10 brands in the world. And now Sears has fallen on hard times, so the brand has no value, so why am I interested? And the thing is, you have to spend money to protect your brand. So what are the common approaches to figuring out how much this brand is worth? Well, what is cost? How much is it going to cost me to build up a brand to the level of what I'm trying to purchase? You can use the market valuation, which is you look for comparables. And you can actually basically do financial stuff, which is discounted cash flow. And do you have to know this now? I'm just mentioning it. Again, I don't expect you to remember everything in this course, but at least if you can kind of remember a lecture, then you know where to go look. In terms of reproducing brand equity, the thing is your strength and stature how do you measure that in terms of equity, and then the outcomes of your brand equity? Can I use it for more licensing opportunities? Um, so you look at, in terms of reproducing the brand, essentially, how much is it going to cost me to do it, but also my classic metrics like DREK, how does it all come in? In terms of the income procedure, I'm not going to go through this, but this is what they do. And so the thing is, there are a lot of different models out there that value a brand. And so what they actually did is they took 7 different models and they gave them all exactly the same data, and they came out with 7 different valuations. And I'm not talking about valuations that are all packed together. No, they're all over the map. There's a 450% difference. And so what it comes down to is valuing a brand is just as much art as it is science. But anyway, the big thing is when you develop any brand, it's still a business measure. And so the thing is, when I look at your business, what's your growth? What share of hearts and minds do you have? And how stable is your brand? Are you going to be around for a while or not? Like, for example, in the early days of Amazon, nobody knew if Amazon was going to make it. Now today, you don't think of it going away. I'll leave this up to you as an exercise to look at it. Is this really a brand or is it bland? Like Twitter. Is Twitter a brand that makes you think good things or not so good things? Uber versus Lyft. To me, there's not much differentiation there. They're the same dog with different fleas except different prices. EA and Nintendo. The thing is, these are the unicorns. These are the companies that actually have billion-dollar valuations. Is anybody going to remember them? Is everybody going to know what they're about? I think the Honest Company has a pretty good chance of making it. Udacity, I don't know. And that's the thing. Are they going to be around in 10 years? And so, summing it all up, again, brands are hard to build. They're easy to wreck. One of you, for a final project, is going to deal with Lululemon. Those are the people who make yoga clothes. They made a really, really big mistake. And what happened is first of all, when their material stretched, it became more see-through. People started posting pictures on the internet of flattering pictures of people and their clothing. And so what did their sensitive, or this is going to be somewhat sexist, but now CEO said, he said, well, maybe you shouldn't be wearing our clothes if you look like that. Yeah, that didn't go over well when most of your customers actually happen to be women. The question is, with all the shenanigans with Uber, are they in trouble? And so the thing is, some of the ugly things that Uber has done, it's like they use burner phones to poach Lyft drivers to talk to them. They try to influence politicians. Yeah, I suppose there isn't anything wrong with that. But the thing is, here's a business that's based on employing drivers P2P. And what are they doing? They're supporting driverless cars. I mean, and they're not talking to the drivers about where their future is going to be in all this. It's like, what does that do to the brand of your company? It becomes a place where people don't want to work. And so, when you think about your brand, essentially make a table. Think about your 4 Ps. Think about how is it impacted by your brand. How do they connect? What's your storytelling? And so when you apply developing your brand, think about the phases. What are the touch points? At what points do people touch your brand? I mean, there are some brands where it doesn't have an effect on anything. For example, in terms of distribution. If I sell like software online for a certain compiler or something like that, it's like I'm making a product for geeks. So, you know, is the esteem of using it all that great? Well, no, it's more about utility. Um, so the thing about, for you entrepreneurs out there, the thing about your brand is you have to think about, am I branding a company or am I branding a product? And an example is the company Spanx, and that's that the women's clothing. It actually has more than $1 billion valuation right now. But it's like, well, what's the company, where does a company start and where does the product end? You don't know. They're too closely connected. And so you have to think about, am I branding my company or am I just branding my product? And so that's what branding's all about. And it's all based on 4 simple concepts. And so you just have to think about the means of supporting each of them.